Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family member? No names, just yes or no.
At my engagement toast, my younger sister stood up in the middle of the room, tapped her glass with that fake little smile she's mastered since high school, pulled out a sonogram photo from her purse like she was presenting a damn Oscar, and said, loud and proud, "Sorry. Guess I win again." And people laughed. They actually laughed. Not everyone, of course. A few friends looked around, unsure if they should clap or hide under the table, but most of the room just played along like she had just cracked a harmless joke. But the thing is, Brooke doesn't tell harmless jokes. Nothing she does is without purpose. And if you know someone like her, someone who has always needed to outshine you, even if it meant ruining your biggest moments, then you already know this wasn't about the baby. This was about me. And what really gets under my skin, what I still think about more than I'd like to admit, is how fast it all unraveled. Because that day was supposed to be mine. For once. After years of sitting quietly through her announcements and her drama and her attention-grabbing chaos, I finally had a reason to celebrate, and I was ready to enjoy it. I was 34. I'd worked my ass off to build a stable life, and when Jake proposed to me, I felt like maybe the chapter of always coming in second was finally over. But then Brooke opened her mouth, and just like that, the spotlight shifted again. But let me back up a little, because this didn't start at the toast, and it definitely didn't start at the engagement. Brooke and I are 2 years apart. She's younger, but you wouldn't know it by the way people treated us growing up. She was the golden child from day one. Always louder, always cuter, always able to twist a situation in her favor. I was the one who followed the rules, kept my head down, got straight A's, and let her have the attention because it seemed easier than fighting her for it. I thought if I just stayed in my lane, she'd eventually grow out of the need to compete. But she never did. If anything, she got better at it. When I got into my dream college, she crashed my graduation party by showing up in a white dress, bringing her new boyfriend, and announcing they were moving in together. When I started a new job and invited the family to dinner, she made a dramatic entrance halfway through the meal, crying about a fight with her fiancé. And I watched as my parents ignored my promotion and spent the whole night comforting her over something that was probably made up. At one point, I actually thought I was imagining it, like maybe I was just being bitter or paranoid, but then my best friend flat out said, "Does she always do this when something good happens to you?" And that was when I realized it wasn't just bad timing. It was her pattern. She got married at 22. Big wedding, 5 bridesmaids, our mom crying happy tears. I was 24 and still single, and I stood up there in a blush-colored dress pretending to be happy while every aunt and cousin asked me when it would be my turn. 2 years later, she had her first baby. Our parents lost their minds with excitement. Baby showers, Facebook albums, daily photo updates. Meanwhile, I was going to therapy twice a week, trying to heal from a toxic situationship I had finally escaped. No one asked how I was doing. No one even noticed I was unraveling. Because Brooke had a new baby and that was all that mattered. Over time, I stopped expecting fairness. I told myself it was just how it was, she needed the spotlight more than I did, and I could either compete with her or learn to live without needing attention. I chose the second option, mostly because I knew I couldn't win if I played her game. But even then, even with all my boundaries and all my patience, she still found ways to sneak in and steal whatever joy I managed to build. So when I met Jake and we started dating seriously, I didn't tell anyone for months. I wanted to protect it. I kept it just mine for a while, and it felt peaceful. When we got engaged, I was actually nervous to share the news, not because I wasn't happy, but because I knew what Brooke would do. But I told myself, maybe she's changed. Maybe now that she's got 2 kids and a house in the suburbs and a husband who works nonstop, she'd let me have this. Just one moment. Just one celebration that wasn't hijacked by her personal drama. My mistake. We planned a small engagement party, nothing fancy, just family, a few close friends, appetizers, some champagne. Jake's mom gave a sweet toast. My dad even got a little emotional, which is rare for him. For about an hour, I actually felt like the main character in my own life. I was smiling, holding Jake's hand, laughing with people who've seen me through the worst. And then I saw Brooke stand up with that damn glass, and I swear to God, my stomach dropped before she even opened her mouth. She didn't congratulate us. She didn't say she was happy for me. She didn't even mention Jake. She just held up that black and white image like it was a trophy and said, "Sorry, guess I win again." She didn't need to explain what she meant. Everyone knew. She was reminding all of us, that she still had the upper hand. That even though I finally had a ring on my finger, she was one step ahead because she was creating life. She made it about her, and she made it clear that no matter what I did, she would always find a way to twist the knife. And the worst part? I didn't say a damn thing. I just stood there, smiling like a fool, pretending it didn't hurt. Pretending I wasn't shaking inside. Because I knew if I caused a scene, I'd look like the jealous one. The bitter one. The insecure older sister who just can't let her little sister shine. But that night, when I got home and took off my dress, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. And I realized something. She might have stolen that moment, but I wasn't going to let her keep it. Not this time. Not again. I already knew exactly what I was going to do next. And let's just say, she didn't laugh when she saw what I posted the next morning. From the moment Brooke stood up at my engagement party with that glass in her hand and that smug look on her face, I knew something was coming, though I still held on to a naive shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, she would surprise me and actually say something kind, or even neutral, something that didn't feel like a knife in my back dressed up as a compliment. But of course, that was wishful thinking, and in the seconds it took her to clear her throat and raise her voice just enough to silence the room, I braced myself for whatever performance she had prepared, because it was always a performance with Brooke. She started with a fake laugh, the kind she uses when she wants people to think she's being humble, but really, she's warming up the crowd for something she believes is going to be iconic, and then she launched into it. I just wanted to say how happy I am for Olivia and Jake. They're so cute together, and it's about time Olivia found someone who really gets her, which sounded nice on the surface, but the tone was off, that little dig wrapped in sugar. And before I could even finish swallowing the sip of champagne I had taken to calm my nerves, she reached into her purse and pulled out the sonogram. She didn't wave it around wildly. She wasn't loud or theatrical in the way you'd expect from someone crashing an engagement toast, which is probably why most people didn't realize how cruel it was until it was too late. She held the image gently, almost reverently, like it was some sacred relic, and with a calm, quiet voice that somehow made it worse, she said, "Sorry, guess I win again," followed by a little shrug that sealed the moment like a dagger twisting just a little deeper. And the thing is, in that second, she didn't need to spell it out for anyone because everyone in that room knew exactly what she meant. She had once again redirected the spotlight from me to herself. She had turned a celebration that wasn't hers into a subtle competition, and even though she delivered the line with a soft tone and a forced smile, it was sharp enough to slice through any pretense of civility. She was declaring, without hesitation, that my engagement was somehow less significant than her third pregnancy. I stood there frozen, my face doing that polite, strained thing you do when you're not sure if you should laugh, cry, or flip the damn table, and Jake looked over at me with this stunned expression like he didn't know if he should intervene or just let it pass. But I shook my head gently because I knew exactly what would happen if I caused a scene. It would become about me being sensitive, about how I can't take a joke, about how I always read too much into things, and Brooke would walk away, looking like the fun, playful sister while I'd be labeled the dramatic one. So instead, I smiled, or at least tried to, and I clapped lightly like the rest of the room, most of whom were clearly uncomfortable, but also unsure of how to react, because no one wants to be the person who ruins the mood. Especially when the person doing the ruining is a pregnant woman holding a sonogram and acting like she just made a sweet little joke at a family dinner instead of hijacking her sister's engagement. What really struck me wasn't just what Brooke did, though. Don't get me wrong. That was brutal enough. It was how quickly the people around us adapted to it, how smoothly they shifted from celebrating Olivia to Brooke's having another baby. Like their internal programming was set to automatically redirect toward her whenever she so much as coughed in public, and I watched as the conversations pivoted to due dates, baby names, how her boys would react to a new sibling, and for the rest of the night, Jake and I were basically background characters at our own party. I went through the motions, smiling through photos, thanking people for coming, accepting half-hearted congratulations that were now delivered with a side of baby talk, and by the end of the night, I was so emotionally numb that I couldn't even tell if I was furious or just deeply, profoundly tired of it all, tired of her, tired of our family always indulging her, tired of being the one who swallows the insult and moves on while she walks away praised for being funny or spontaneous or just being Brooke. Jake tried to talk to me about it afterward, when we got home, and I finally kicked off my shoes and let myself exhale, and he asked, very gently, if I was okay, but the truth is I wasn't. And I didn't even know how to begin explaining how much that moment had cracked something in me, not just because it was humiliating or because it once again pushed me into the shadows, but because it was so calculated, so perfectly timed, so surgically executed, that I realized she hadn't just stolen my moment. She had planned it. She brought that sonogram in her purse. She waited until the toasts. She waited until the entire room was looking at me, celebrating me, finally giving me the kind of attention she couldn't stand to watch me receive without inserting herself. And the line, "Guess I win again," that wasn't an accident or some offhand remark. That was the whole point. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about every time she's pulled something like this, and how I've always let it go, always taken the high road, always told myself that rising above was the better choice, that someday she'd grow out of it, or maybe just run out of ways to make everything about her. But this time, something shifted. I felt it. A kind of stillness, not the sad kind, not despair, more like focus. Like clarity. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't going to cry or vent or complain to friends who would nod sympathetically, but ultimately say, well, that's just Brooke. I was done playing the victim. I was done being predictable. And I already knew exactly what I was going to do next. She thought she had won. She thought she had the final word. But the next morning, I posted something that changed the whole game. And this time, she wasn't the one smiling. When I woke up the next morning, after a night of staring at the ceiling, trying to find a way to force myself into sleep that never came, I didn't feel the kind of anger that makes you want to scream or break something. And I didn't feel the heavy sadness that sits in your chest like a stone. What I felt was sharper than that, something cold and quiet. The kind of focus you get when you realize there's no use begging for fairness or waiting for justice from people who are never going to give it to you, and instead, you start thinking clearly, strategically, not out of spite, but out of necessity, because you've finally accepted that no one else is going to level the playing field for you, so you're going to have to do it yourself. I didn't say a word to Jake as I got out of bed and made coffee, because I didn't want to explain anything until I had it figured out in my head first, and, thankfully, he knew me well enough to give me space without asking a dozen questions. He just watched me move through the kitchen in silence, sensing something had shifted but not knowing yet what that meant, and, honestly, I didn't either, at least not fully, not until I sat down at the kitchen table with my phone and pulled up the photo I knew I had taken for this exact reason, just in case I ever needed it, because a small part of me, the part that had lived through years of Brooke's sabotage, had never fully believed that she would let me have this engagement untouched. The photo was simple. Just Jake and me holding hands at the party, smiling at each other while everyone in the background was clapping, and I cropped it just right so the image ended on us and not on Brooke, who was in the process of standing up in the next frame, seconds before she hijacked the moment. The caption didn't need to be loud or dramatic, because people pay more attention when you say less but imply more, so I typed out, "New beginnings and not the kind that come from accidents." Then I hit post. I didn't tag anyone, didn't include hashtags, didn't add hearts or sparkle filters or any of the other nonsense people use to make their announcements look polished and performative, because I wasn't trying to sell a fake fairy tale, I was making a point. And I wanted it to land exactly where it needed to, right in Brooke's lap, without a return address. Within minutes, the comments started rolling in, mostly from friends and acquaintances who had been at the party. People who had also seen the look on my face when Brooke dropped the sonogram like a grenade and acted like it was some kind of playful sisterly moment, when in reality it was just another chapter in a long history of calculated humiliation dressed up as quirky charm. Some people got it immediately. A few posted things like, "Well said," or "Oof, that's how you do it," while others asked more cautious questions like, "Everything okay?" or "Was that shade?" pretending to be neutral when they knew damn well what I was doing. And I let them wonder, because letting people fill in the blanks is sometimes more powerful than spelling it out. Brooke didn't comment, of course. But she saw it. I knew she did, because about an hour later, I got a text from our mother, not Brooke herself, but our mother, which told me everything I needed to know. The text was classic mom, vague, non-confrontational, and fully designed to keep the peace while ignoring the root problem. "Hey, sweetheart, Brooke mentioned your post. She's a little confused. Can you maybe clear the air with her?" No questions about how I was feeling. No concern about what it had felt like to be publicly humiliated at my own engagement party. Just a polite request to smooth things over, like Brooke was the one who'd been wounded and not the one who'd tossed a grenade and walked away smiling. I stared at that message for a long time before locking my phone without responding, because I'd spent most of my life being the one to smooth things over, to apologize first, to explain myself in the hopes of keeping the peace, and this time I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to shrink myself back down to make other people more comfortable. Brooke wanted to play games, and for once, I wasn't just going to sit there and watch her win, I was going to play too, but smarter. That post was just the beginning. What mattered more than anything now was what happened next, because what Brooke didn't know, and what I hadn't even been sure of myself until that moment, was that I had finally hit the point where I stopped caring whether anyone liked me for it. I didn't care if people thought I was being petty or vindictive or going too far, because they hadn't been there through years of being second, years of watching someone turn every family event into her own personal stage while I stood quietly in the wings. They hadn't seen the pattern, how she always waited until just the right moment to upstage me, how every success I had somehow triggered a new crisis or announcement from her that swept the attention away, leaving me clapping politely for her while choking back my own bitterness. So no, I wasn't going to delete the post. I wasn't going to call and apologize. I wasn't going to respond to our mother with some carefully worded message designed to ease the tension. I was going to let Brooke sit in the silence and wonder what I was planning, because people like her, people who are used to controlling the narrative, hate nothing more than uncertainty. They can handle anger, confrontation, even tears. What they can't handle is calm, strategic silence. And the best part? I didn't even need to lie. That caption, not the kind that come from accidents, was the truest thing I'd ever posted, and it wasn't just a jab. It was a clue, a seed, something for people to chew on and talk about, and believe me, they were. Over the next day or two, I got texts from friends who weren't even at the party, asking what had happened, and while I didn't explain much, I didn't deny anything either. I just said, Brooke made a choice and I made mine, and that was all they needed. But what I didn't say, what I kept to myself, was that this wasn't just about a post or a caption. This was about finally pulling back the curtain on everything she's been hiding. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Brooke wasn't just manipulative. She was sloppy. She had secrets. And now, for the first time, I had a reason to start looking. And what I found? Well, let's just say she should have thought twice before trying to upstage me with a sonogram. Once I realized Brooke wasn't just addicted to attention, but actually relied on it to keep people from looking too closely, it all started to click in a way I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge before. And as much as I hated that I had let her get away with so much over the years, I also understood, finally and fully, that she had only been able to pull it off for so long because she had built a carefully constructed version of herself, the bubbly, charming younger sister, the overachieving mom, the relatable wife with funny parenting anecdotes and picture-perfect family dinners that most people were too dazzled or distracted to question, and the second that image cracked, even just slightly, She was at risk of losing control of the one thing that mattered most to her, the narrative. What I had done with that post wasn't just irritate her or cause harmless drama, I had disrupted her story, and more importantly, I had made people curious, which was something she couldn't afford, because curiosity leads to questions. And questions lead to truths that don't fit the version of her she's worked so hard to sell to everyone around her, especially the people closest to her, like her husband, her in-laws, and the swarm of acquaintances who view her as the fun, stable, Pinterest perfect mom of two with another little miracle on the way. I didn't go digging with the intent to destroy her, not at first, anyway. But once I started looking, once I opened my eyes to the things I had ignored or excused or explained away for years, it was almost laughable how much was right there, barely hidden. Like she hadn't even tried that hard to cover her tracks because she had never needed to. People just believed her because it was easier than confronting the reality that someone so polished on the outside could be so chaotic underneath. I started small, mostly out of caution, but also because I didn't want to seem obsessed. I asked one of my friends who used to babysit for her casually if Brooke and her husband Matt had ever mentioned having trouble lately, and my friend paused, gave me this look that said she knew something but wasn't sure if she should say it, and then finally admitted that the last time she was at their house, about 3 months ago, Matt wasn't living there. Apparently he had moved out for a little. Well, because they were taking space, which was interesting, considering Brooke never mentioned it to anyone in the family, and certainly not on social media where their smiling family photos continued to appear like clockwork. That was the first crack, and once I had it, the rest started to unravel. I remembered that around the same time, Brooke had been posting those cryptic inspirational quotes on her stories, the kind that say things like, "Sometimes distance brings clarity," or "Protect your peace, even if it hurts," which at the time I had rolled my eyes at, assuming it was just another one of her performative moods, but now it made more sense, especially when I checked the dates and realized they lined up almost exactly with the timeline of Matt's absence. It wasn't hard to figure out that something had gone down between them. I didn't know the details yet, but it was clear that the third pregnancy had not been conceived during a picture-perfect moment of marital bliss, and that was where the next piece came into play. A memory that had been buried deep until now, probably because I had dismissed it as irrelevant at the time. A few months ago, Brooke had casually mentioned reconnecting with an old coworker, a guy named Daniel she used to work with at a marketing firm before she had her second kid, and she had even joked about how he always had a crush on her but was too nervous to ever act on it, which had annoyed me because it felt like another one of her subtle brags wrapped in fake humility. Back then, it seemed harmless. Now, it seemed suspicious. So I did what anyone would do when they're trying to confirm a hunch without setting off alarms. I opened a burner account, one I had made years ago to follow true crime threads without linking it to my real profile, and I used it to message Daniel, under the guise of being a former coworker who was trying to reconnect with Brooke, hoping he could help get back in touch since she wasn't answering my texts. It was vague enough to not raise eyebrows, but specific enough to get a response, and sure enough, he replied within an hour, telling me that he hadn't spoken to Brooke in a while, not since she cut things off suddenly, and that he was surprised she was even still with Matt because, according to him, she had told him things were over. I didn't push too hard, just enough to get him talking, and by the end of the conversation, I had what I needed. He and Brooke had been meeting up just for drinks during the time she and Matt were separated. And while he didn't say outright that anything happened, his tone, the awkward pauses, the phrasing, told me more than he probably realized. She had used him, plain and simple, and when she decided to go back to Matt, she cut him off without explanation, leaving him confused and, based on how quickly he opened up to a stranger, still a little hurt. At that point, I didn't need a DNA test or a confession to know the truth, or at least enough of the truth to understand that this baby, the one Brooke had used to hijack my engagement party and once again crown herself the reigning queen of family attention, might not even be Matt's, and even if he didn't know that yet, even if he had decided to forgive whatever happened during their break, the fact that she had buried the separation and kept up the perfect facade told me exactly how terrified she was of being exposed. She had built her entire identity around being better, the better daughter, the better wife, the better sister, the one who always had things together, and now the cracks were showing, and she knew it, which is why she texted me 2 days after my post. Not to apologize, not to ask how I was doing, but to accuse me of trying to make her look bad and ruining a special time in her life, which made me laugh out loud because for someone who has spent her entire adult life twisting the knife with a smile, she had a pretty thin skin when the tables were even slightly turned. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, I had the upper hand, not just emotionally, but factually, and I knew exactly what to do with it, not scream it from the rooftops, not make a dramatic announcement or start a war, but something quieter, smarter, and far more devastating. She stole my moment in public. I was going to unravel hers, quietly, strategically, and right in front of her. The funny thing about revenge, real, quiet, surgical revenge, is that it doesn't need to be loud to be effective. And it doesn't have to involve screaming or dramatic confrontations or any of the theatrics people associate with soap operas or bad reality TV, because the most devastating kind of payback, the kind that sits with someone long after the moment is over, is the kind that's delivered calmly, politely, in a setting where no one expects it, and that's exactly why I chose her baby shower as the place to unravel her story, not because I wanted to ruin her life in front of her friends, but because I wanted her to watch the cracks spread quietly and uncontrollably in a room she thought was entirely hers, surrounded by people who believed they knew her better than they actually did. I didn't plan the whole thing out in one sitting. It came together slowly, over a few days, as I let the pieces fall into place. And what made it so satisfying was the realization that I didn't have to create anything fake or manipulate anyone or even say a single cruel word. All I had to do was give people the truth and let it do the work for me, because Brooke's entire image, her whole identity, was built on a foundation of curated fiction, and the only reason she had been able to keep it intact for so long was because no one had ever challenged it directly. The shower was hosted at her house, which was perfect, because it gave the whole event a sense of intimacy and control, her space, her rules, her performance, and I showed up like everyone else, gift in hand, smile on my face, playing the role I had played so many times before, the supportive sister who was there to celebrate another milestone in Brooke's endless string of wins, and what no one knew, not her friends, not her in-laws, not even Jake, was that in every single party favor bag, tucked underneath the pastel tissue paper and pink ribbon, I had slipped a small folded note. Nothing dramatic, nothing aggressive, just a plain white piece of cardstock with one simple question written in clean, block letters. Ask her who the father is. No return address, no signature, no context. Just that one question, sharp and quiet and poisonous in the way only truth can be, and I knew exactly what it would do, because even if most people didn't take it seriously, even if only one or two of them decided to ask the question later in private, it would be enough to start the ripple, enough to plant the seed of doubt that would grow roots in places Brooke couldn't control, because once that question existed, once it was in the air, no amount of curated Instagram posts or fake laughter at brunch would be able to silence it completely. I watched her open gifts, laugh at inside jokes, pose for photos with that polished smile she always turns on for a camera, and I waited, patient and calm, not because I wanted to see her fall apart in real time, but because I wanted her to realize. In the quiet hours afterward, when the house was still and the guests had gone, that something had shifted, that the air around her was no longer as secure as it used to be, that eyes were watching her a little more closely now, not with admiration, but with suspicion, and that someone, somewhere in that room, had opened their gift bag and read the note. I didn't stick around too long, just long enough to be seen, to be remembered, and to slip out before any questions could be asked, and when I got home, I waited a few hours before posting again, nothing flashy or confrontational. Just a short video clip from my engagement party, the one where Brooke had stood up with her little surprise announcement, only I cut the video right before she reached into her purse, so it looked like she was about to say something important, and I captioned it. Some people think stealing joy gives them power. But the truth always shows up, even if you try to hide it in a photo. Again, no names. No direct accusations. Just enough implication to make people curious. Just enough to make her sweat. And sweat she did. By the end of the week, the whispers had reached Matt, that part one know for sure, not because he said anything to me directly, but because a mutual acquaintance, someone who knew both of us from way back in high school, texted me out of nowhere and asked if everything was okay with Brooke's marriage because Matt's been staying at his brother's place, and that, to me, said everything I needed to hear he knew, or at least suspected. And Brooke was no longer in control of the narrative. She didn't reach out to me again after that, which I expected, because people like her don't apologize when they're cornered. They retreat, regroup, and either double down or disappear, and in her case, I think the shock of losing control so suddenly had her too rattled to do either. She posted less, stayed off stories for a while, and the few photos she did share were generic coffee cups, quotes about resilience, filtered pictures of her kids, nothing personal, nothing revealing, just noise to fill the silence, which told me she was scrambling. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't do a victory lap. I planned my wedding. Quietly, confidently, and without her help, without her shadow looming over it, because I had finally done what I should have done years ago. I took my life back from someone who had never had the right to control it in the first place. Brooke had always played the game by twisting stories, turning every room into a stage, and stealing moments that weren't hers. But this time, she tried it with someone who wasn't playing along anymore, and what she didn't realize, what she still probably hasn't admitted to herself, is that once people stop believing your version of the story, you lose more than just attention. You lose the illusion of control, and for someone like her, that's worse than any public humiliation. She pulled out a sonogram at my engagement party because she wanted to remind everyone that she still mattered more, that even in my happiest moment, she could steal the show. But the only thing people remember now, when they talk about that night, is how quiet I was, how composed, and how, the next morning, without raising my voice or shedding a single tear, I posted something that started the unraveling of everything she had built on lies. And maybe she'll recover. Maybe she'll find a way to spin this too, to pretend it was all just a misunderstanding, or that Matt's absence had nothing to do with anything, or that people misread the note and she never saw it herself. But the truth? She knows. She knows I wrote it. She knows why. And she knows that this time, she didn't win. Because the difference between her and me is simple, she plays for attention. I play for keeps.